Hi and welcome to this battle report on the action on 13th of March 1797, where we're playtesting the beat to quarter rules. This is beat to quarters. I mentioned it in my last video, and this is our playtest of it. We did a playtest in 1 to 700 scale. The original rules are written to be played in 1 to 1200 rules. And also in the previous video I said I was going to change it to 171, but we ended up not doing that, like times 171 to account for scale, because we were worried that the ships would leave our playboard that was a 4x6 inch CMAT. The funny thing is, as I was editing this video, I was actually contacted by the original author of the rule set here on YouTube. He wasn't very happy with his original rules. There was a whole story on how they were released without being playtested by the company, and he didn't get paid either fully, so that seems like a sad story. We didn't feel, he had a problem with the way the gunnery worked in his original rules, and we didn't feel that very much. I guess there was a bit of math to do when we were playing this, and I will tell you along the way, but we didn't feel that it impacted us very much. I mean, you had to calculate each gun type. We did have a couple of different gun types on those small ships. Here you can see the ship I chose, HMS Viper, and it's a Navy cutter, or didn't choose. We actually chose a historical engagement of 1796, where a British Navy cutter, this is a known cutter, so we actually had the real stats, so the tons and the crew, the guns it was armed with. And this ship, Viper, encountered Spanish privateer, and they had an engagement, and we figured like we would like to recreate this one for the battle report and also for this playtest. And so you can see the stats here, the HVN, that's basically the tonnage times 2, and that's also what you use when you're being fired on the hull, so that's your ship points. And the PVN, that's a number to measure how strong your ship is compared to the opponents. So the PVN for the Viper was 3,848. She had 60 crew. SVN, that's the value you calculate in advance, and each time you take sail damage to that amount, 57, you will lose the sail, and there's also a potential of losing a mast at that point. The GDN, and that's the next value, that's actually where each time you lose that many hull points, you will lose a cannon. And that could be, you will roll a percentage, and that could be any cannon on that side that you were fired on. We used the rules where we were raked, you could end up on any side, since it's going along the whole hull. But then otherwise you have the port side and the starboard side, and you will record the amount of guns that you lose during the battle. There is also the turning points, and small ships have many turning points, so this little cutter has 10, and that's the maximum amount. And there's also a nationality gunnery modifier, and the British, they do have 1.0, and that's also counted into the PVN. So this becomes a more powerful ship than if, for instance, it was a Spanish ship with the same stats otherwise, because of the gunnery modifier. And it's also going to affect the way the gunnery works. So if you want to balance things, then you're probably, in playing British against Spanish, you'll probably end up using a smaller British ship against a larger Spanish one. The QR, RU, RN, B, and D, that means different, that's the quarter running, and that's the best point of sail. And then you have running before the wind, and that's the RU. And then RN is the reaching, and then the D is when you're beating before the wind. And so you can see here now that we switched to Nuestra Señora de la Piedad, the Spanish brig in this encounter. The British ship had a lot more speed, being a small cutter, than the brig. The brig has a larger HVN because it's a bigger ship, so it has a lot more hull value. This wasn't known of the original ship. We haven't found any stats for the original ships as far as the hull size, so we just went with a Spanish brig that we found. Crew was just 42 in this historical encounter, and we kept to the encounter 66, SVN, GDN 33, and it has slightly less turning points, so 9. The natural gunnery modifier for the Spanish is 0.35. She has a slightly different broadside than the British ship, where she has 2 6-pounders, 3 4-pounders, and 4 half-pound swivels per side. The British ship, I forgot probably to say that, has 6 4-pound cannons per broadside and 4 half-pound swivels. The swivels, we wouldn't use them unless we're in point-blank range. We figured that would be a boarding weapon. Maybe we're wrong with that, but that's how we played it. So that's the ship card. You also have a sail and mast diagram, and that displays the actual masts and sails on the ship. A brig is counted as having 7 sails, so you'll count all the jibs as one, as I probably mentioned in the last video. So that means that you will have the 1 jib, and then she'll have the 3 sails on the foremast and 3 sails on the mizzenmast, and that's also with the spanker. The cutter, she has 4 sails, so she'll have a jib and then 2 sails on her mainmast and also a spanker. So that's how the cards work. On these cards you will also record the damage as the battle progresses. So you'll have crew damage section, you'll have a gun loss section, sail damage and hull damage section, and then also recording fires and special damage. We decided to add a rule immediately. We always tinker with stuff, so we added a 1% chance of a ship catching fire each time it reached a surrender point. Each ship starts with 10 surrender points, unless the PVN is huge difference, then the smaller ship will lose a couple of surrender points immediately, just because it's facing a larger ship. I think all of this is very clever. How it worked out was a little bit of counting initially to figure this out. And here you have the compass and also the calculator for the direction. Turned out really neat. We will be using this for other games, I say, like Black Seas. Made it really easy to calculate when you're like unsure which point you are sailing. So you have, and it's all marked there. So stopped, quarter reaching, running, reaching, beating, and then you have 2 different, because a fore and aft rig ship can sail a little bit closer to the wind than a square rigged one. So it has 0 to 4 points, while the square rig has 0 to 5 points. We also rolled for the wind, and it ended up blowing to southeast by east for this battle. Then we decided also we ended up with a slight breeze, and we decided that we were allowed to tack. Even if the rule says that you're not allowed to tack in a slight breeze, we decided that that would be okay for this battle since the ships were so small. Probably wrong, but that's what we decided. We also decided on a sectors where the ships could set up, and we rolled a D8 to see from which sector you set up, and those were quite large sectors, so you had a lot of choice of how you set up. And here you have the initial setup. We didn't show where we set up, we just wrote it on a paper, and then we placed our ships at the same time. And we're into turn 1, and turn 1 was just spent maneuvering. You see here we're using the turn radius and also rulers, because the measurements in this game are in millimeters and in centimeters. So you need rulers if you're going to use these rules. Ships pretty far apart, and if you're used to playing Black Seas, you'll have probably engagement going on longer ranges. We're close range brawlers, both of us, so we always end up close seems like in our battles, but you can fire from longer ranges. We also tried that, and you will see that later on. So I'll speed it up, the actual footage here, by 6 times, and I also made cuts because sometimes we took breaks and so on. The ships were standing around on the board, so I've condensed the action slightly. And I also added these top-down views that will show once in a while, so you'll see the relative positions of the ships in the top-down view, and that I hope will make the battle a bit clearer. I made a big mistake with my Navy cutter here, where I made a 10-point turn, figuring I would be actually beating into the wind, but I didn't. So I ended up stopping myself, and I guess that would be what would happen, because if you want to attack, you actually have to have been beating the previous turn. Also, you cannot accelerate more than double the speed you had previously, or deaccelerate the same, so half your speed. So you can't go too quick between speeds. We didn't find anything in the rules about sail damage if you slow down too quick or something like that, but we'd probably add that in the game. Maybe not historical, I'm not sure, but we would like that. And here you can see we're just writing down what we're going to do for each turn ahead of it, and then we're just playing out simultaneously. Since the distances are quite long so far, we haven't went to this other system that is in the rule with the phase movement, where you split each turn into 5 seconds and plan out those in advance. So we're still just maneuvering, trying to get into position. You have a wider firing arch than you will have in Black Seas, because you'll have in Black Seas you'll have a straight firing arch straight from the side of the ship, and here you'll have actually 3 points on each side of the center. So here I'm actually in the arc of Marcus' brig. However, he had loaded a special type of bar shot or shade shot, because he's trying to dismat me, and it turned out all his shot ended up in the water. The range was too far, because you can only fire those at medium range and below, and we were actually still at long range at this point. So his first fire just went into the water. I had loaded double shot because I thought, oh, that's cool, but you need to be close to use it. So at this point I also changed my ammo to normal round shot. And here's the brig. I think Marcus did a really good job with the paintwork on this one. And then the only time when we're actually measuring to see where we're at the wind, that's in the end of each turn. At this point we forgot to film with the 4K camera, so you got a couple of stills there. You didn't reach very much, there was some maneuvering being done. So here I'm firing with my Navy cutter, and that's my first broadside. It did 87 points of hull damage, which meant that Marcus lost 2 guns on that side. So he lost a 6-pounder and a 4-pounder on the starboard side. And here you see the diagram again, and at this point we've gone to, because the distances started to become that close, we decided to go to phased action, so you'll see that later how that worked. Marcus decides to fire back, and that is also, you need to say that you have an intention to fire when you're planning your turn, and if it's phased you need to say when you're firing. Also you have to say when that you are going to fire at some point open round, and that's, we also said that when we actually almost ran it as a phased action initially, just to find out who's shooting when. And here you can see the cards with the initial damage. So Marcus, he did 46 points of sail damage. He was aiming high, and that's not I didn't pass my SVN, so I didn't have to see like if I lost the mast or I wouldn't lose the sail. I ended up choosing to fire early in this next segment, and it was a really bad roll, so I just did 21 points of hull damage, but that meant that Marcus lost another gun. So his starboard broadside started to look pretty weak at this point. And I tacked through the wind as well, and ended up still being in the wind at this point, so I had to next turn keep maneuvering to get out of the wind. Here Marcus fires back at me, and he managed to do 14 points. It was a bad roll, 14 points of sail damage, but that means I passed my first SVN and I lost my jib sail. So I rolled, and it ended up being that I lost my jib sail. The mast was not destroyed, however, so there was no wreckage to clear. But we decided, and that's not in the rules, but we decided that if you lose the sail, you'll lose 10% of speed. Of course, if you don't have any sail, then it's 0. But for each sail, you use 10%. That was really quick, so we'll probably do that another way in another battle. So we're getting closer, and we're mostly here at some points we were at medium range, but also we're getting into close range. And when you're firing on close range, you have a much higher probability of hitting your opponent. So when you're firing at extreme range, you'll have a factor that you add into your firing solution, which is 0.07. And then 0.40 for long range, 0.54 for medium range. Close range is 1.0, and you also add 13 to the dice roll. So you have a lot higher probability of scoring hits when you're firing closely. And the firing solution is actually made by, first you decide how many hits you have, so that's the number of hits is decided by the dice roll expressed in decimals. Then you have the range modifier, like I described just now, and then also the quantity of guns, also the number of guns. And you roll this for each type of gun. We actually decided to just make one roll for the dice roll, and then modify it depending on the different types. We just have to cut in here. You see there I actually managed to get a bow rake in. The bow rake was not as effective as I hoped, but there is also a modifier for bow rake where the actual damage value is 1.5. And the damage, you count that at the end, and that's the number of hits that you counted earlier in the firing procedure there, and then or finding hits, and then it's the poundage of the guns. So 6-pounder would have a higher probability of causing damage than a 4-pounder. Then the nationality gunnery factor, so here comes in the Spanish are firing a lot worse than the British with their 0.35 compared to the British 1.0. Shot modifier, and Marcus all the time had a pretty good thing with the shot modifier since he was firing that dismantling shot, the bar shot or the chain shot. He always had a 2.5 modifier at the end for his damage. I had a 1.0 firing the round shot. However, I was firing on the hull, so he lost a lot of more surrender points than me. I also managed to, at the very end here, a really strong broadside, and that's also what ended the battle. It wouldn't have to end that way if my roll had been worse, because at that point Marcus got a really good hit in also on my masts, scoring 143 points of mast damage, which meant that I actually lost my mast. I had to roll and see, and I had a mast destroyed, the mast falling to starboard because of the wind, and I would have been fouled for a couple of turns there because my mast were relying on the side of the ship. And then maybe he could have like maneuvered around me and then fired into me, maybe turned it around. So it was a close run thing, but in the end I scored 252 points of hull damage there from my close range broadside, and that brought Marcus to his last surrender point, which means that he immediately surrendered. Yeah, I missed out a lot of things that we were doing in the rules, but this is just a quick run through. And this is the card at the end of the battle. And as you can see, there we've recorded the damage, and where Marcus actually, I forgot to say that he got a rather critical there at one point when I scored those 89 points of damage. And that's a very small percentage chance. There's actually just 2% chance that you get a rather critical, so he had a lot of bad luck there. He also lost a lot of his guns on both sides due to my fire. We did not fire on the crew, so that we didn't really try out. But we did have one fire at the sail and one firing at the hull. And here you can see me recording the damage. I also wrote down the turns where I did receive the damage and what happened. So, a dismasted Navy cutter with a struck Spanish brig, privateer brig, is the end result of our action, or our recreation of the action of 1796 here. Here we swap out the model for a wrecked model. This is the final position of the ships. We don't have a dismasted model for the Navy cutter, so we did not end up swapping them. And here you have the equipment that I used. I used the camera, and that's the same camera I'm using to record my voice right now. And then a small action cam that was taking stills from above every 40 seconds so that we could record the whole engagement. Also the final plan, when we went to this phased movement, as you saw on those cards in the video, we didn't end up recording everything on the paper. We just had it on the cards, but they're in the video, so you can see it later. For us, also even with hindsight and knowing what the author said about the actual rules, I guess if you would have a lot of guns, like a very large frigate or a first rate, maybe the calculations would take a long time when you're counting gunnery. I'm sure I could probably try to make an online calculator where you just feed in the data and you'll have a really quick calculation done for the battle, so that could probably be negated. But I guess this is, if you want a lot of definition in your gunnery, that this is the rules for you. If you want it quick and easy, maybe this is not the rules for you, at least not the gunnery. He did point me to some other rules that he has posted on a forum, on the 3 decks forums. They were down at the time when I was looking last, so I hope they will be up again and I can take a look. Otherwise, he actually offered to send this changed gunnery rules to me, that he thinks is much better. I mean, he's the author of the game, so I'm definitely going to give that a try. But for a small engagement like we had right now with just 2 ships, I think it worked out really nicely with also the gunnery rules. I like the definition, like each gun type is calculated for itself, so you get, even with a small ship like this, you get a really high definition battle, which I wouldn't get with the Warlord rules, to be honest, the Black Seas rules, because the Navy cutter would just have like 10, 12 ship points and 1 light gun, and that would be it. And the brig would have 20 ship points and 2 light guns maybe, or 18, or I don't know what the small brigs, I can't remember, but so you would have a lot of definition there. And also the thing that I like the most is still, even after the playtest, is the movement, that you're planning things by just looking like a commander would from his deck, I guess, and then things play out. And as you could see when we were running the phase movement, planning to fire earlier, thinking that you have the chance, can make a lot of difference, because then your guns are actually going to hit ahead of the opponent, like in reality, I guess. So we are super happy. We will do more playtests next time, probably with larger ships, frigates. We have one we've been looking at. If it's me and Marcus, it's probably be HMS Tartar against a larger Spanish 36 gun frigate. I forget the name right now, but I will look it up. And maybe if I play with my brother, we'd trade some larger brigs, or maybe British against a French ship. We're also thinking maybe trying it with 4 captains, so each captain have a ship of their own. 2 sides, 4 captains, like we usually run our Black Seas games. So we'd have a Spanish ship and a French ship, or 2 French ships or 2 Spanish ships, commanded by my brother and Marcus, and then me and Björn, we would do the British. And we'll see how that plays out. So using these rules for 4 ships, but with 1 captain of each. Because then you would have 4 ships moving at the same time. It would be really interesting. I guess you need to be good friends. Like, I couldn't see this running really well in a tournament maybe, because people would be trying to get the best out of the rules, so to say. So there you'll probably be running with something simpler. But if you're good friends and you're just after the immersion and to have a really good time, I do recommend this. Caveat is that I would like to look at the rules that the author recommended. Maybe those are much better for me as well, and then I'll make a video on those. But for now, this is the most fun I've had playing a naval engagement in the Napoleonic era so far. So, if you liked the video, subscribe and give a like, and there will be more videos. Really enjoy making this content for you guys, and really enjoy playing the games.